Hi. Which one is faster, XML or SQL? For example, you want to store some configuration on your website. You have two options. One option is to have that information stored in your SQL or MySQL database, and the second option is to store that in an XML file, and then you can retrieve it and read its values and do whatever necessary action you want to do. So I was wondering, should I store my, configuration or some small piece of data really in XML or SQL, and which one is going to be faster? So I created a test. It's kind of a comparison, and in this test, I'm going to be showing you which one is actually faster. So my XML file here is this, as you can see. Basically, it contains city names. The main node is city, and then there are properties of name and slug. In this case, I have only two names, two cities really, Peshawar and Islamabad. Peshawar and Islamabad. Now, in this case, I'm going to retrieve this in XML, which I've done that already. So this is the XML file that I'm going to be reading, and the first file that I'm going to be using is readxml.php. So this test is going to be PHP and MySQL rather than some other technologies. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm recording the time, and this records time in microseconds. I'm loading the file, cities.xml, and then this is my keyword which I'm searching. So I am going through each node and finding its value. And if it's found, it says product found. If it is not found, it says product does not exist. And then I'm recording end time. And then I'm finding out the difference between the start and the finish. So let's run the first test. So it is taking 0.000266 microseconds. So this really effectively is 0.266 milliseconds. So as you can see, it's pretty fast. I wasn't really expecting it's going to be that fast, but it is really fast. Now, and let's run this a couple of times. So, this is 0.3 millisecond. This is again 0.2 milliseconds, again 0.2 milliseconds. This one is 2.1 milliseconds. And typically, it would be 0.2, 0.3 milliseconds. So in this case, it's 0.26 milliseconds. Now the second test that I'm going to be doing is actually, it's a read SQL, which basically this data is stored in the database. Let me show you that. So there's a temp table, there is no indices, there is just two values. So there is city, then there is city slug. It's the same two cities. And what I'm doing is basically my SQL query looks like this. Select a static from temp where city is equal to city. So really, if the city is found, I return true. If it is not found, I return false. So let's go back to the read SQL file, which is this one. So what I'm doing here is storing time in microsecond again, as I was doing in read XML.php. Then I'm doing the DB, including the DB function. The DB function basically has these two functions, and the one that we are going to be focusing here is this one. So we're going to select city and city slug from temp table and checking if it contains the city value. If it does, it returns true. If it does not, it returns false. So here, the code basically calls that function, and if it looks for that city, and if it's true, it says city exists. If it is not, if it is false, it says city does not exist. And I'm then recording the time and the time difference as well. So let's run this test. This is the read SQL file. Now it ran in 0.001618 microsecond, which is 0.1 millisecond. So remember, this one is 0.000026, and this is 2016. So this is, almost 10 times slower. Let's run this a couple of more times. This one is now even 10 millisecond, which is really too long. This is 2.3 milliseconds. This is 6.6 milliseconds, 4.8 milliseconds, 7.6 milliseconds, so 6.1 milliseconds. So as you can see, the values, the difference here is, almost 10 folds. So here I can read that value, search for that particular node in 0.2 milliseconds, and in this case I am taking 6 milliseconds. So this is really a huge difference. I think the reason, now in this case, the test is on localhost, so the test on a live site, the results on the live site might be different, the difference could be because in SQL case, I think a lot of time that probably is taking is the connection string. So it is first including this file, and then it's setting up connection, and then it's calling that series. So the query itself, when I run the query, you can see that the query runs in 0.3 milliseconds. So it's the same time as read XML, which is 0.26 milliseconds. The query does run faster in 0.3 millisecond, but the connection, the connection also takes time, so the whole process takes longer than reading a simple XML file. So I'm going to do a little modification here and see where, so I'm going to do a little modification here and record time at this point as well, which is basically connection time, let's micro time here, true, and here I'm going to say connection time is equal to end time, which is connection, minus start time. And let's include that again. Connection time is so let's run this and see what the result would look like right now. So read SQL. So yeah, the total time is 0.19, which is 1.9 millisecond, and the connection time is actually 1.2 milliseconds. So I think that you can see that a good chunk of time is taken by the connection. Let's do a further test. Query time is equal to time difference, which is the total time, minus connection time. So you're gonna print query time as so just to make sure from this point and this point only connection is established and then query is executed here. So this block would give us the yeah, this should give us the query time. So elapsed time 4.2 milliseconds, connection time 3.26 milliseconds, and query time is 0.54 millisecond. Let's run it again. So I think it's obvious that the big chunk of time is actually taken by connection. So the result is that SQL to store configuration in XML file is actually more efficient than store configuration in SQL.